Welcome back to Close Up. Last year, the Governor's Commission on Law Enforcement Accountability, Community and Transparency laid out a roadmap for reform endorsed in its entirety by Governor Chris Sununu. But some of those policies, like the collection of race and ethnicity data in police interactions, have faced an uphill battle in the legislature. Here this morning to discuss, James McKim, LEACT Commission member and president of the Manchester NAACP, and Chief Anthony Bean Burpee of the Guildford Police Department, who serves as president of the New Hampshire Association of Chiefs of Police. Thank you both, gentlemen, for joining us. And Mr. McKim, let's start with you. Describe what the commission backed in terms of data collection regarding police actions and people of color, and why it's important to have that information.
Good, thank you, and thanks for doing the segment. What we wanted to make sure was captured is data about the race and ethnicity of folks who were stopped at traffic stops, who really engage with law enforcement at as many levels as possible. And the reason that's important is that we know from other states and locales that there is a disparity in the stopping of people of color in situations which can lead to death. And we've seen that happen in many states across the union, and that's something we don't want to have happen here. It hasn't happened here that we know of, to the extent of people dying, but we also don't know the extent of the stops and the extent of how implicit bias may be creeping in to law enforcement, and that causes a distrust in the eyes of many people of color of law enforcement, because there's a lack of transparency. And this is not at all to say that law enforcement is intentionally stopping people of color more regularly, and that could lead to more significant harm. But we want to make sure that implicit bias is not creeping in, and for that we need data.
Chief Bean Burpee, what are some of the issues from the police perspective with implementing a more robust data collection regime?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for having me on. So some of the concerns there, we obviously, had chiefs that sat on the LEACT Commission, certainly work with the stakeholders, and think that this certainly is some good legislation there. It just needs to be done. We want to make sure that it's done effectively and efficiently and uniformly, so that the information is going to be accurate. So some of the concerns, we had is that some of the limitations that exist is, obviously it talks about the amendments or the Senate bill was that there's going to be ethnicity and race listed on driver's licenses, and that could be optional. So, our concern is if it's not listed there, how then do officers on the side of the road collect that information? And I don't think, one, it is appropriate for officers to be standing on the side of the road having conversations with operators to explain to them why it is we're trying to collect this information, to ask them how they identify with their race and ethnicity. If it's on the license, if it gets that far and it's there and we can collect it, that's great. But if it's not, I don't think it's appropriate for the officers to be having those conversations with operators. Nor from a safety standpoint is it safe to be standing there for an extended period of time trying to have that conversation with them. I think additionally is that I think that there will be some, disparities. My understanding is there's only 7 states across the country that collect this information. New Hampshire is a huge commuter state, and it is a place where people come to vacation. So we are stopping motorists who have licenses from across the country. So how do we get that information from everybody to make sure that we are collecting it and doing so accurately? In addition to the fact that most of our records management systems across this state, as most do, only have a place under race for one race. So what do we do when we have individuals who are biracial and identify by more than one race or ethnicity? How do we collect that data? Do we have a conversation with the operator and say, you're biracial, you identify with 3 different races, but which one are you going to pick so that we can use? If we're trying to collect accurate information, we just need to make sure we have these conversations. How can we do it uniformly so that we are getting the accurate information and it's not inaccurate.
No doubt a complicated situation. Mr. McKim, though, by not setting the framework for a uniform statewide system or providing funding to make it easier for police to do this, the legislature or the lawmakers putting an impossible burden potentially on small police departments in New Hampshire?
Well, that's a very valid point about the burden, and the term unfunded mandate comes to mind when we talk about this kind of legislation. But there are sources of funding that can be brought to bear on this, and that we're really trying to set the stage for that, to say that this is important enough that we want to make sure that there's a fund, and that the legislation calls for a fund for some of this work as well, to be made available to local agencies. But we also want to help the local agencies fund grants, which they do for many other purposes and efforts to adhere to legislation and regulations.
Chief, can you describe a system that would work and would be acceptable to the chiefs?
Well, yeah, I think if there was something that the state itself collectively went to, I mean, right now, we all deal with what's called an RMS, or a records management system, and there are at least 3, if not 4, that are being used across the state. Every agency is different. So, for example, we use this program called IMC here in Guildford. I pay $12,000 a year for maintenance fees on that. That program has been out for about 20 years. It has been recently bought by several different companies. It now currently sits with a company called Central Square, who recently told all of its IMC customers, we will continue to support IMC, but there are no more program upgrades, no more software upgrades or anything. So basically, it's going to become obsolete. Central Square is coming up with their own records management system, which they're trying to push, but that comes with an exorbitant amount. In addition, here in Guildford, we've got 20 years of data that is worthwhile information that we want to have migrated over to potentially a new RMS. But that costs money. So you have agencies, as you know, there's over 200 agencies in New Hampshire that are either 1 to 2 person departments to agencies that have over 100. And so we all collect that information differently. When everybody got into IMC, it was a standard system, and then every agency can pay between $5,000 and $10,000 and have it uniquely designed to collect data or to do what they want to do. But again, that all comes at a cost. Grants are great as long as grants go on. I understand what Mr. Kim is saying, as long as they continue, because you are going to have these smaller agencies that aren't going to be able to afford it. And then at some particular point, the grants run out, and then that burden will fall on local municipalities. And then we've got to get our selectmen and our councilors to back that to continue going forward.
Mr. McKim, the governor endorsed these changes. Do you think he should be taking a more vocal leadership role right now in trying to get some of these reforms across the finish line?
Well, I think I'm not going to speak for the governor. He has some calculations that he's making about this. I think he has made the statement that he is in support of this, and I'm not sure it's worth him doing more. This is something that really the people need to weigh in on, and from the hearings that have occurred, people have weighed in on this. So. To the extent that the legislature listens to the advice of those of us on the commission who are pulled together to make recommendations and listens to the will of the people, I think the governor is allowing the democratic process to play out.
And as we get closer to the end here, I want to get to you both one more time. Chief, are you optimistic that these reforms can take hold at some point, that this process is going to continue, and that sort of the upswell that we saw last year, a lot of that's cooled, that people don't go back to their castles and sort of go back to the status quo? Do you think there's going to be progress made here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as Senator Bradley said, I mean, if it's going to be talked about in a commission, let's move forward. Absolutely. I think, and again, like I said, the chiefs are behind that. The Chiefs Association, there are a majority of chiefs that want to see this happen. We'll do what needs to be done. There's going to be a margin of error, I think, until we get it up and running. I know Vermont is currently doing it. They've had their glitches. It's been up since 2014. But again, we want to make sure that it's done correctly. And we'll work with stakeholders moving forward. We're absolutely willing to be part of that conversation. I was not on the LEAC Commission, but Mr. Kim knows my predecessor and several other chiefs that were there. So I think he can attest to the fact that certainly the chiefs are on board. We are actually, have robust conversations with our stakeholders, and absolutely, let's move forward and get some of those recommendations in place.
And Mr. McKim, what about you? Even though not everything is moving forward right now, do you think this process is going to continue, that it won't just fall by the wayside?
I absolutely think it does. I mean, just the fact that and I said this in our hearings, just the fact that we've had these conversations and we're having these conversations, which we've not had at this level before, gives me hope that we will make progress and something will come out of this.
All right, Mr. McKim and Chief Anthony Bean Burpee, we appreciate your time today on Close Up, and I'm sure we'll be checking in again on this in a matter of months.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you very much.